Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of our Visual Insights. Today, we've had some baseball guys, some softball coaches, some other sport coaches in the past. Today is more on the sports vision side. Some of you guys who know me or don't know me, I should say, I've been training visual performance skills for 20 years. I learned everything from my father, Dr. Bill Harrison, who started working in visual performance skills in 1971. As a former optometrist, and I've taken it on the last 20 years and promoted it, built myself up. My degree is exercise physiology, so I'm not an optometrist. And today we are bringing in Dyana Bullinger from the Air Force Academy. She's the Assistant Director of the Human Performance Lab and also the Vision Lab at the U.S. Air Force Academy. Welcome, Dyana.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I think, Dyana, why don't you give us a little background of you and the U.S. Air Force Academy, and then we'll kind of go off from there.
Awesome. So I actually have my degree as well in exercise physiology. I also was a strength coach a couple years back. I came in and I'm at the Academy as the assistant director, but like Ryan said, I run primarily the vision lab and also everything else we do in the lab. So we are a human performance lab. We don't just do vision training. We do physiological testing and training for our cadets and our cadet athletes, as well as any surrounding military. So the Vision Lab at the Academy has been around since 1994. Obviously, we've grown and modified since then, but we've had it for several years, run by a couple different people. Al Weil was a main personnel that ran the Vision Lab and really grew it back in the 90s and 2000s. And then Dr. Zupan kind of helped that continue once Al Weil left, and then I took over from Zupan.
No, we got to call him by his real name. It's Crazy Al.
It's true. Everyone at the Academy calls him Crazy Al.
Yeah, so Al goes way back with my dad. He and my dad used to talk a lot and bounce ideas off each other. And I think there were some late night calls of, hey, I got this new great vision training idea. What do you think on there? But, I give Al a lot of credit for what he developed there on a college campus, but two at the Air Force Academy. And I know Colonel Zupan carried that on, and I think you and I have talked about that. He had to become a believer. He wasn't a believer at first, and became a strong believer. And when he, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when he retired, he really wanted you to take the program over and run with it.
Yes, he did have to become a believer. He said that Al really had to convince him that it was a good program, and I think they did a couple research studies, and after that he was sold. But you're right. When I came back, that was kind of one of the big things, was to make sure I knew everything I could about the vision program and how to keep it running and to modify it and continue it as after he left.
Yeah, I think that's a big concern, not a concern, but the fact that Dr. Zupan had to be convinced in a way is something that we deal with in this industry, as no matter what, if we're a doctor, a coach, whatever, selling our players, selling our parents on what sports vision really is. And you're, it doesn't have to be a perfect description, but, how would you describe what maybe sports vision is and maybe to what it is at at the Air Force Academy?
Yeah, so a lot of times I have to, during tours or maybe when we get a new team that comes in, I do have to at least give them an idea of what it is and why they should train it. And so a lot of times I talk about the musculature of the eyes and training the visual system and using those two parts to really utilize it within athletics, but also for their job after athletics, right? Once they graduate, they're going into the Air Force. Some of them will be pilots, some of them will be on the ground. So I think not only do I try to describe it, how it can be beneficial for them as athletes, but also how can it be beneficial to you as an officer in the Air Force?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think that's a fascinating situation that you have these clients, in a sense, or athletes who are not just athletes. They're going on to create a bigger and better job. And I think that's kind of a key thing, even for me, with youth athletes, as well as pro athletes, or I should say college athletes, maybe not the pro guys, but it's really the education of, hey, this is going to help you on the field, but hey, here's a byproduct. It's going to help you in school. It's going to help you in your work. It's going to help you just in life in general. So you're not doing something that's not going to help you, but we get to have the fun part of doing around sports.
Right. And I think a lot of people, when you can connect it to sport, then it like has a spark, because people love sports for the most part, and they love having that active component.
Yeah.
being connected, it kind of sparks their interest.
Yeah, sports is obviously the great connector, and I know and then on the other side of that, when you have your athletes, and depending on what athlete, they are all looking for an edge. So if they learn that there is an edge here, even if it's a 1% edge, which is a lot of them what they're looking for, and a difference maker, then you can get them to buy in and work on a skill set that might take them to another level.
Right. And I think it even goes back to, if we can compare this to strength conditioning. I mean, goodness, strength conditioning 10, 20 years ago, people had to be convinced to like it, had to be convinced to use it. And once they figured out it was useful and they could get that edge, everyone bought in.
Yeah. What were some of the difficult things for you? Because you came from the strength and conditioning world. You didn't really come from the vision world, or what was some of the difficulties that you found jumping in and getting your feet wet in a sense in this?
I think part of it is trying to not use my strength coach brain 100% of the time, because it is similar, but it's not the same. And part of the difficulties is trying to find ways to modify it that are within that vision training system, instead of just, we can just make it like a strength program. Because again, it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. So how can I, with a very non-ophthalmologist background, continue to modify this program, make it relevant for the athletes, but also actually training something and not just making something up because it looked cool?
Yeah. Now, I want to expand on that a little bit, because I do understand what you're talking about from the strength and conditioning side of things. It's, you guys in the strength and conditioning world, you want maxes, minimums, sets, reps, testing protocols and things like that. And, I know that's a challenge sometimes that I face, because a sports scientist or a strength and conditioning coach, I may talk with an organization, they talk in the strength language, and I have to educate them that, as much as they mesh and they interact, they're not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when I talk to coaches, because I think that's what they first go to. And we do develop our programs very similar to a strength program, meaning we don't necessarily have sets and reps, but we have like a written program that cadets will follow. But it is very interesting having that conversation where it's like, okay, we're not lifting weights here. I mean, I know it's similar, but it's not the same thing. So we have to kind of transition. And sometimes I have difficulty transitioning it myself, because I am a strength coach and I'm not an ophthalmologist. So I have to kind of check myself and do a little extra research to make sure I'm on the right track.
Yeah. Now, at the Human Performance Lab that you have, and I've been lucky to visit it. Wish I had been there earlier, because I knew about it. I've seen pictures. I just hadn't been out there, and I got to go out there a couple years ago and see it. And you have a lot of fun equipment, and like I said, my degree is exercise physiology, so it brings me back to college and some of the unique tools that you have in there. Outside of the vision training, what are some of the cool things that you have in that facility there, the Human Performance Lab?
So we have 3 metabolic carts that we'll use for endurance or resting testing. So we'll have one that we'll do a VO2 max with, which my best description is the Nike commercial where the guy's wearing the mask and there's a hose, which that one we have utilized with a couple of our sports. It gives them a good baseline of how aerobically fit they are. Our other metabolic cart we'll use for RMR testing, which is resting metabolic rate testing, and that gives how many calories an individual will burn if they just laid in bed all day. So it can kind of give us more of a guideline when we're giving them nutritional information of how many calories should they be consuming, mainly to maintain their body mass or their muscle mass, because a lot of our cadets don't eat enough. And then we've got 2 DEXA machines, which are awesome because they give us body composition, lean mass, fat mass, bone mass. And those are really good for us to kind of guide how we're training them, also guiding their nutritional, path. And then we also have a hyperoxic tent. So we are at 7,200 feet here at the Academy, which will decrease the amount of intensity we can have in a workout. So we can put them in the hyperoxic tent, pump in oxygen, make them feel like they're at 500 feet. And we have a special treadmill called a force treadmill where it's human powered, and we can put them through some high intensity training programs, which is pretty nice because we can hit them with a 15-minute program and it'll kill them. And then they're ready to go down to sea level, which is really beneficial for our athletes, since I think the only other team we play that's at altitude is Wyoming.
So is that just for the athletes, or is that for the cadets as well?
So all of the testing we can do with anyone. So any of our cadets, any of our athletes, any outside military that wants to come in and get tested, we actually do that quite often. The vision training lab in the hyperoxic tent is mainly for our athletes. We have some caveats. We have some caveats where cadets can use it, like with our hyperoxic. We've had a couple marathoners come in and train in there. Some of our club athletes that aren't considered intercollegiate. And with our vision training, if a cadet has a concussion, we have a concussion protocol that they can do within our vision lab.
So, and we haven't really talked about the vision lab itself, but do you integrate a lot of that stuff from the hyperoxic chambers or any of those things and the vision training together?
I haven't done it within our testing or our training that's not vision within the lab, but I have talked with a lot of our strength coaches, and some of them will start to implement some of that vision within their strength training. It's not 100%. I think there's probably 1 or 2 coaches that will do it every now and then. The place that I've seen it the most integrated within strength conditioning is at Fort Carson. They'll have their special forces guys that will do it while they're doing their strength training. And I haven't really thought about putting it into some of our stuff. I'm not sure how I do that, but that's a good idea to even just mull over.
Well, I think part of it is the challenge of time. And this is where, we have some college coaches on and regular coaches, but, even doctor, how much time do you have with the athlete? And, what's your biggest bang for your buck for that? And it's a challenge when you have, in a sense, split personality. You're running a lab and you're running a vision training and you're working for a university. And I'm sure that's a big challenge in trying to get it all to mesh together effectively.
Yes, that's actually a really good point. Like every university knows, they are pressed for time because we only have so many hours you can train an athlete. For the academy, it's almost even worse because they have military training, they have academic time that they have to do their academics. They're in school for several hours. So most of our coaches don't even reach their 20 hours. They're actually doing their best to get to that 20 hours. So when we have vision training into their program, I have to do my very best to make it like a 15 to 25-minute program, because they have to get, like you said, the biggest bang for their buck in the shortest amount of time, so that they, 1, feel it's beneficial, but 2, I'm not taking up a lot of their hours that they don't have.
So what teams at the Air Force Academy take advantage, a majority of, I shouldn't say, that take a lot of advantage of your vision training?
Actually, our top team is women's tennis. She's been coming to the lab for about 22 years now. It's really a staple in her program. She's the only team that I know of, other than baseball, that uses it year round. She's in there during preseason, off season, during season. She comes 2-3 times a week with her team throughout the entire year. The only time I don't see them is over summer because they're not here. They're off doing ops and stuff for the Air Force. Baseball, it's tough for them to come in the lab because of where everything's located. It's so far apart. But I've actually worked with their coaches, and we've kind of built their own mini lab inside of their clubhouse, and they can do that during batting practice. They have some stuff in their dugout they can do during the games. So they utilize it a lot as well. I just don't see it as much because the coach pretty much runs that portion of it.
Yeah, I think that's key too for anyone who wants to set stuff up. Is there is the training center. Like we have our training center where guys can come and train in the off season, train what they need to. But then there's the home training and the team training stuff where they can actually do it at practice. And the nice thing, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, Anna, is there's a lot of simple, easy things that can be integrated into practice. So it's not taking away from other practice, but it's just adding a component to integrate within there. And I think that's key for coaches to understand, key for even sports vision doctors to understand that, look, it doesn't just happen in the office. There's a connection that it goes with a trainer or with a coach, and how you can connect to the athletes that way.
Mm-hmm. And we've had a couple of different teams have done that. Like our water polo goalies, they'll train in the lab, but then the coach will add in some different exercises for them to do on the pool deck. So they don't have to keep going up and down between the two. They can do during practice. Our hockey goalies have come in quite often, so they have a couple of their own little tennis ball tricks they'll do as a warm-up for a game. They'll do it within their practice on the ice. So those are a couple other teams that have come in. But I agree. I think that it doesn't have to be in a lab or in an office. It can translate to other things. And if you can put it in other skill acquisitions, maybe they start picking up those tricks of the trade and they can start using it during their practice and make it a little bit more lifelike instead of like in a box.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And that's where sometimes a limit of what people think vision training is they limit to being in a box, and it's not in a box completely. It's a integrative process from from the exam of someone's eyes to an evaluation of the skill sets, to the training of the skill sets, to the application of the sport, and how they integrate that within the sport. I know a lot of coaches always ask me, and you probably get the same question, is what's something I can do to practice? What can we do at practice? And you and I know, but maybe you can kind of go over some different thoughts or products maybe you use, or maybe ones you don't use, but you know of that might be an easy product for someone to get involved with.
The ones that we actually outfitted our baseball team with were the Brock string for the depth perception tests, and they'll actually use that in the dugout before they go up to bat. So if they know they're second or third up to bat, they'll start getting a couple quick reps on the Brock string prior to them batting. And I think you can buy that from Brunel for $15. You could probably make it for about $5.
Yeah, we have a kit, what we call the eye track, where we've changed it up a little bit, added an exercise plan to it, but it is something that's easy that can be put into practice for BP or pregame stuff. And then, we advance it a little bit more to a depth perception training product that I've got players that using cards and using apps or something that take it to another level. And that I got guys who actually put it in their helmet and put it on their bat before they go to the plate on there.
That's awesome. Somebody just asked, what it was called. So I call it the Brock string. Ryan had said that he has a couple other things that he's used in the past for his guys and girls. But so Brock string was kind of our main one. We also gave them some saccadic charts, just numbers and letters in a row, and they have to stand so far apart, read those letters, numbers, and they can do it prior to batting. They don't have to. That's just one that we've implemented. The near far trainer, like if they have a small little saccadic card and then a far saccadic card, they can read back and forth. Those are some things we've given to some of the athletes that they can either make on their own, or they can have it like our baseball team has it in their dugout. A couple of the other things, I've given some strobe glasses out as a loan for some of our teams to use. Like water polo uses it quite often. Hockey uses them. No, on the deck. Actually, it's a funny story. Our water polo coach really wanted some strobe glasses, and he wanted them to be waterproof. And I was like, I'm pretty sure they're not waterproof. So I put him in contact with Herb Yo, and they did for about 6 months try to make waterproof strobe glasses.
Yeah.
And it became too much money for not enough prop. Like they just didn't see it making them a lot of money. So they didn't actually build them. But
the way to get around that is you just have practice at night and put some strobe lights on.
That's perfect. Well, and they've also done stuff where he'll have them face the wall and like throw the water polo ball off the wall, and they have to catch it. Or they'll have their eyes closed or be blinking and they throw the ball. I mean, some of that obviously is going to have some hit or miss based off the athlete and how much space you have. But
you can do a lot of dry land training with them, definitely.
Right. And so he's gotten to now where he'll have them do their own training on dry land on the pool deck, or he'll send them up to the lab every, I think, 1 to 2 days throughout the week. They'll come up and they'll train in the lab during off season and stuff when they're not traveling as much.
Yeah. With those different athletes, and we kind of talked about this prior, when they send them up, with college athletes, you have this time issue, and you mentioned, which is cool. And I know you don't have enough time, but a lot of them will come up on their own. When they find the value, they'll come out and work on their own and not count against their hours. They use it as their own personal development.
The hockey goalies in particular, their skill coach has never pushed them to come to the lab. I think he knows that they come to the lab and he's not opposed to it, but he's never pushed it. So they've come on their own time, and it's not accountable because they're volunteering to come in. There are some compliance rules with that. Like I can't report to the coach, hey, I saw these guys today, but they love it. The hockey goalies in the off season will come in 3 to 5 times a week, depending on their school schedule. In the preseason, we'll see them once to twice a week, and then they'll still come throughout the season if they get a chance.
Yeah. Now in the facility, obviously you have the strobes and you have the stuff we talked about, but I know you also have some other equipment, some wall equipment, light reaction stuff, some fit lights, reflection. You used to have D2. I'm not sure if you still have D2 in there anymore. So when they come in, do they come in, and we talked a little bit as individuals, but you have the whole team come in and then spread them out in the little stations to get work done?
Yeah, that's actually, you said earlier, how do we kind of program with time and stuff? And a lot of it is because I have so many exercises. I've got, I think, about 16 different exercise stations, if you want to call them,
Mhm.
which is nice when a team like women's tennis, they've got 12 athletes. So when they come in, they've got 20 minutes to get in and out. They can be spread out throughout the lab doing their different exercises and then just trade off as to what they have next on their program. So we do have Dynavision, we got Reflection, we have SVT, which is sports vision training from Australia. We have a Makoto. I would like to get a new one, but I can't get a hold of the CEO to refurbish it. But strobe glasses, we have the Fit Lights, we have the Saccades, near far, Brock string. We have a rotary, so it twists in a circle and you're trying to find the numbers, letters, whatever's on the board. We have some eye ports. I haven't used those in a while, but we do implement those every now and then. And then we build our own Tachistoscope. They have the flashing at them, and we build those through PowerPoint and Apple Video, I think, or Microsoft Video. So we build those, and those are in everyone's program, regardless of what sport they play.
Yeah.
T-Scope is always on their program.
I think those, some of the products you use, and even for me, we have some great equipment in our facility, some high-end equipment. It's not affordable for everyone, but it's affordable for the facility. But there's some smaller products, smaller things you can do to implement vision in whatever you're doing. Whether the kid's working on his own or they're working on a sport field. And part of it is, you just got to, people need to ask questions. They need to learn what sports vision really is instead of, hey, just look there.
Yeah.
What doesn't happen. Now back to your athletes, and I know this is kind of a little different in your situation. They go through their physical and stuff. Do they go through well, they have to, I would imagine at the Air Force Academy, they got to go through some kind of eye exam, but do they go through a comprehensive sports kind of vision exam there?
We do not have any type of exam in the lab, and part of that is because of my background not being an ophthalmologist. I'm not quite sure I could run some of the tests that may be needed. They do go through a lot of vision stuff for the Air Force Academy, and they eventually will go through even more strict, sorry, somebody's knocked on my door. They will go through some even more strict vision testing if they want to become a pilot, because they have to get pilot qualified.
Yeah.
So we don't actually have any tests for us that we run, but a lot of it I'll gauge it off of how they're doing in their training. So how do they do on the Brock string? How do they do on the Saccades? And I kind of gauge it with how it looks when I'm watching them, how it trains, and what they're giving me feedback on, and then I can kind of change up their training based off of that.
So to clarify a little bit, I mean, obviously most doctors can do the vision exam, but from a evaluation of skill sets, you don't do too much with the teams. Partially, I would imagine, because you don't have a lot of time. And, I think that's another thing. It goes back to strength and conditioning. And I used to fight this quite a bit, is everyone wanted, well, what's their baseline? And to me, I'm a little different. It's like, I know what their baseline is. You don't need to know their baseline. What we need to know is, how are we going to get them better? What are we doing to get them better? I don't care where they're at. I want to know where they're going and what they're getting to. And like you said, you have, from your experience now, you've learned how they're working with the Brock string, how they're working with the charts, how their scores are. And now you know where to direct them to improve their skill sets and how it applies to the sport.
Right. And I agree. I think that we don't have the time to even take the whole team through a baseline testing procedure. And luckily for me, most of the coaches don't care. Like, if they're sending them to me, it's because I can take care of them and I can train them. And they're not going to question too much. But usually the coaches that would question too much don't send me their athletes. So that's probably why we don't have that caveat as much.
Yeah. And at the same time, if there's something going on, there's something they're not doing well, then you can go, hey, I think there's something wrong. I think we need to go a little further with your testing that you may not be able to do, but someone who can help you with on there.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it helps when the coach can kind of see the program itself, and maybe you can talk them through why it's not as necessary to have a baseline test. And again, we can tell when someone's doing Brock string and they tell you, I only see one string. It's like, well, we know what the problem is.
Yeah.
Like you're not using both eyes. So that's something that we can try and train and push further so we can make you better at that. Like, we had a gymnastics kid that they sent to us, which we haven't had gymnastics in the lab in a long time, but the coach was like, this kid, hurts himself constantly. He can't seem to catch the bar right. He breaks his fingers. And I was like, I bet he's got terrible depth perception. And he came in, did a Brock string, and it was awful. So like, I think the coaches for, at least at the academy, the ones that buy into the program are like, you know what, you got it. We're just going to send him to you. But I agree. I think that's something that strength coaches always want. They want baseline numbers.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes attracts them to a doctor side of things, because the doctor can give the prescription of where things are, and it is valuable. I don't want to diminish that value at all. It's a combination of everything that's important, but there are certain times that you don't have the time or you don't have the resources to get those checked. There are things you can find and do, and then you can kind of go, oh, I can see I need to adapt here because this kid's struggling with this. But
Right.
you know, I saw well, I'll give an example, is actually my son, who's a lacrosse player. You know, he argued with me how he could see fine. And, you know, he's not going to tell dad he can't. And we did on the synaptic base station, he did some evaluation, and he didn't do well on his clarity. And I'm like, what the hell's going on with you? You're my son. You can't be doing it. So he's like, Dad, I see everything fine. But we got him to see my sister, who's the optometrist for us. And sure enough, he got some contacts, and now he's like, oh, okay, now I really see. Athletes don't know they need something until they're shown that they can't do what they need to do.
Right. And our bodies are great at adapting. So you think that you're fine because you've lived with it for so long. So you know how to adapt to it. Then you give them like a new thing that makes it all clear and like, holy crap, I know it could be this way.
Yeah. You know, and going back, you know, you kind of brought this up with your teams, and this is something that coaches are afraid to learn something that they don't understand. And that's something that they're not supposed to know everything. They're not supposed to know how to control some of this. They just need to know, hey, there's something here. Then, you know, give them to you to say, hey, can you help in this sport? And when I look at, when someone asks me that, first of all, I look at what the sport is, what's the visual demand on that sport. And there are certain sports, like say golf, it's not about depth perception or tracking, but depth perception will affect certain things in golf, or eye alignment will affect certain things. But there's more visualization skills. There's different skills that are involved in golf, where baseball or hockey, or even go back to hockey. So we're talking about hockey. The hockey goalie and the hockey defenseman have different visual demands. So how do we look at what we have as tools to affect those demands to make that athlete believe in themselves and perform at a high level?
Right. And I think you've nailed it. Like if you can give them that scenario of how it connects to what they do, a lot of those, at least the athletes, from what my experience, and even the coaches will start to buy in. And I guess I'm bad at this. I take on way too much, which part of it's because I have way too much to take on, but I take on way too much, and then I can't actually do certain things to the best of my ability. And I think our whole society is, for the most part, caught in this, that they want to be the best at everything. So I agree that some of the coaches, they want to take on too much, and they want to have that as part of their job. And if you have somebody that you can push that to, like push it to them so that you can focus on other things. Because there's certain things that I wish I could push to someone else, and just, why don't you focus on that, and I can do all the vision stuff or all the training.
Yeah, and that's the same thing, you know, we're talking coaches, but that's strength and conditioning coaches too. You know, as well as PTs and ATs. They want all those controls, and you know, sometimes they just have to let those controls go to someone who understands what needs to be done a little bit.
Right. And not all of us have that ability, right? Like if you don't have a vision training program at your university, or even where you coach or train, it's one of those things you have to figure out how to implement it yourself. But I mean, if you've got that personnel, like just send it to them, let them do the job.
Yeah, you know, like I said, my degree is exercise physiology. Been an athlete all my life, but you know what? I'm not going to pretend to be an exercise physiologist. I don't practice it. I'm not involved in that side of the sport anymore. I'm going to send them on to someone who's got more understanding and work hands on hand, you know, with that daily. And I think that's a key component to, you know, we're talking from the coach to a sports vision trainer, but also even from a doctor to a sports vision trainer. You know, there's so many different roles that can play, and a doctor has a role in sports vision, a trainer has a role in sports vision, a sports strength and conditioning guy has a role in sports vision, and the coach on the field has a role in sports vision. And they can still mesh, but there's different roles, and try to do all four roles, it's not going to happen. It's hard to do on there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and
Um,
I agree. There's small ways to implement it into your practice or into your coaching.
yeah, a question, or it was kind of a question. I'm not sure a full question, but it brings up one to you. Do you have any experience working with eye trackers there at the Air Force Academy?
No, I do believe that POTIF is like the almost the unit of SOCOM that covers all special operators. They have some eye trackers that they've utilized. I don't know how they utilize them. We have not put them into practice yet, partially because of funding and partially because of figuring out how I can utilize them in a short amount of time. Because if I can only buy one, I can't share that with our 29 sports.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out how to utilize it in the short amount of time frame that I have not figured that out yet.
I'll tell you what, that is a challenge. We have two eye trackers, but it takes way too much time, and you need a staff of a couple to be able to run it and then analyze it at the same time. I played with one too, probably I'm going to say about 10, 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and this thing was huge, and I'm like, it's not worth my time and effort. I can get more benefit to the athletes in another way, but it's exciting. Eye tracking is exciting. It is where a lot of it is where are the eyes looking at the right time, and it kind of goes into another component is I think VR has some good value down the road. I wouldn't say today, but I think down the road where eye tracking will be involved in VR. And so are you doing much in VR at the academy?
We did get a demo. It was Neuro Tracker. I think we did
Neuro
that demo. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't Neuro Trainer, because Neuro Trainer was the one with the balls. It was right.
No, that's Tracker. No
Oh,
Tracker.
okay. So I'm mixing it. Sorry.
Yep, you got it backwards.
So we got a Neuro Trainer that we utilized, but it came down to the same thing that we used it with our hockey goalie that was coming in pretty commonly, and I wanted to get feedback from him, and he liked it, but it took 15 minutes to get one training session in for him. So it just didn't seem to work out for what we have. I think it, like you said, in the future, it may be more benefit if we can get 15 of them and we can have a good program that we use. I think that we could make like a 5-minute program they could use. But again, I got to get anywhere from 3 to 20 people in and out in 20 minutes. And that wouldn't work within our program.
Well, even on a human performance side, as you know, if it takes too much time to set up, you just don't have that kind of time. So you need some things that are quick. And that's where, you bring up Neuro Tracker, which is more of a software program that, they can actually do it at home now. There's a new home version people can do that they don't have to do it in a full setup necessarily. So there's some new things that are coming out that will be a lot easier to assign and, that won't take part of that practice or don't need to be in a big training center to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question here from Ludwig about he's a soccer goalkeeper coach from France. And he wants to know what would be the most important, I think, visual skill for you to work with them. Maybe in your mind, I can answer too, but go ahead.
We have actually worked with our soccer goalies the last couple of years. A lot of it, we do a lot of the baseline stuff to make sure that their musculature is strengthened and they don't have a lot of fatigue. But I think I focus a lot more on the tracking ability and then their hand-eye coordination to make sure that they can read kind of and anticipate where that, I guess, ball's going to go and be in the right spot at the right time. So we've done a lot of the processing information, the decision making, and more of that hand-eye coordination and ball tracking.
Yeah, and with goalkeepers, that's it. I kind of laugh a little bit and backtrack because this is something my dad always kind of he wanted to do, and we'll be doing this, but is goalkeeper camps. And when we say that, it's not just soccer; it's the hockey goalkeeper, it's the handball goalie, it's even a catcher, lacrosse goalies, the water polo goalies. They all have in many ways the similar visual demands that need to be applied. And, obviously the evaluation is important, making sure they got the skill sets. And, like I said, baseline's good, not necessarily, but it is good. I'd get a baseline if we have the time and energy to do that. And then train those skills, whether it's depth perception, which to me is a big deal, tracking how the eye muscles function with the eyes a little bit more. And then again, you kind of brought it is how that brain processes that visual information. And then how does it turn it into the motor reaction that needs to happen on there. So, I look at it personally as what are my steps what's step number one to get to the output that we want to get out of there. And whether it's hitting, whether it's, driving or something, that first thing is a visual input. And if that visual input is wrong, then guess what? All those motor skills that you've trained or all those fitness skills you're going to train may not work if you're giving yourself bad visual information to be able to respond to that. So we want to clean that up a little bit more.
They'll work, but for the wrong action.
Exactly. I lost track because I had another question for you. I was going to ask you, but with the Air Force Academy, I know that there's quite a few people that have come and visited you because you are one of really, I know some other colleges that are trying, but you're really the only college, even though it's Air Force Academy, college that has this kind of training center integrating with their sports. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations, maybe some of these coaches who listen, that how they can, tell their school they need to start doing something like this?
Yeah. Actually, we do. I get that question often when I have any type of college or university coaches that come through the lab for a tour. A lot of it, I think, is based off what their infrastructure is. So we're kind of different, where our performance lab, our primary mission is the cadets and the cadet athletes. We're supposed to train them, test them, enhance their performance in any way possible. So that's different than most universities. Their performance lab or their exercise physiology unit, their job is teaching and research, right? So they don't spend a lot of time with the athletic department. So typically my suggestion is just based off the people I've worked with. I've seen a lot of people implement vision training through physical therapy. If they're there for physical therapy, you can add in some of those vision exercises, especially the baseline and basic ones, to try and get that buy-in. I've seen people add it in their strength conditioning program where they just tie a Brock string on a squat rack, and while you're resting, because you need some rest time, you're doing some Brock string training. And you could do saccadic stuff that way, some hand-eye coordination drills I'm sure that are out there you could add into the program. So that's kind of the first step I've seen people use. Other than that, you could try to set up your own, but that may be too cumbersome for a coach to add in their own vision training program within what they already have to do.
Yeah. What you're basically saying, there's a lot of resources out there, whether you get the school involved or you're on your own. There's definitely a lot of resources that can be applied. And I think part of it, and we've talked about this, and this is for the future for people to understand, is the education is not out there. And the education will be out there, and there are better things coming out here. I know, speaking for myself, obviously we're developing some training programs for strength and conditioning coaches as well as regular coaches that they can implement within their team setting or their player setting. But even with the optometry world, there's more education coming in how to give a better sports vision exam and how to transition them to the next step on there. So I think there's going to be some good headway coming down the road. And there are some colleges, obviously you and Duke is another one. I know Cal's trying to implement something. I know not Liberty College in Texas has working on one. And there's some that are really pushing forward in a positive way, and there's some that are just getting their foot wet to say, hey, we have a sports vision lab here to do that. But part of it is a lot of these schools want to do research, and research is awesome. And I think from you do a little bit of research. For me, I'm not in it for the research because I don't have a research lab set up. I'm in it for getting my athletes or the athletes I work with, the teams I work with, to perform at a level above that they're performing at currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know that Cal was setting one up, which is it's interesting to me because our athletic director, not the one we have now, but the one we had before, moved to Cal, and he knew about the lab. He came in several times, so that's really interesting. Not a problem. I just thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. So I think again, there is opportunity to learn and there's opportunity to implement. But we'll kind of wrap a few things up. If anyone's got any questions and want to submit them in the chat, please do. Or if you want to raise your hand and talk, we'll unmute you if you want to answer a question. But Dyana, what's some of the value? We talk about setting things up, we talk about what we do, but what do you see in the value of putting sports vision to your athletes? What are they getting out of it?
I think normally the first joke I get is they're a better driver. They always say that. And I'm like, that's fine because you're on the road that I'm on. So I'd rather you be a better driver. But seriously, I think a lot of them, they say they start to notice things quicker. They're getting, especially tennis and basketball, they'll get to things faster than they used to because I think they're processing quicker. Anticipation for baseball has been a big one. They feel like they can anticipate where that ball's going to go, and they have cleaner hits. I mean, it's not 100% foolproof because there's a lot of variables in these sports. But a lot of them is just feedback from the athletes and the coaches. Like tennis, the reason she bought in, she was like, they were getting to shots I'd never seen get to before. And they're hitting cleaner shots and they were making better decisions. And she's like, I'm a good coach, but I'm not that good. And I think that helped her buy in. And then through there, she lays it to the athletes. Like, if you want to be a better tennis player, past what I can teach you, this is one way we can do it. So I think a lot of it is unfortunately anecdotal, right? It's from the athletes themselves, but I think that's what kind of pushes it further because they start to see the changes in themselves, right? They're making more shots on the court, or like for our hockey goalies, they're saving more that they probably shouldn't have saved in the first place because how could they?
Yeah.
I think they start to notice these little things in their own sport, and then it starts to make them buy in just a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this conversation with someone yesterday, and it was with a major league player. It was about a major league player that we've done some work with, a little bit of work with. And sometimes these guys who are great athletes, they don't understand it right off the bat. But then they kind of reflect and they look back. And this guy said, ever since I did that, I've been seeing the ball really, really good. And so, you always get people after their career going, God, what you did really, really helped me. I just didn't understand. I knew it was helping me, but I didn't know what I was really doing as a player, which is not always good for the industry. But, when it comes down to it, hey, look, research is good. People want to research, but it all really depends on performance. People want to say wins or losses don't matter. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, wins are going to pay, and and success is going to pay. And no one wants to fail, and they are going to fail, but they got to learn how to succeed. And when they have a consistency of that success, they find themselves climbing to another level. And that's why I feel like I've been lucky. I've had a lot of top athletes who are at the top of their game, but they want to look more. They want to know another edge. They want to find out what's going to keep them on top. And I could probably tell stories for days on some of those guys and what they've gotten out of it. Another thing I wanted to add, and I remember that this was a question I added earlier. You brought this up, and we may end up talking for an hour on this one now, is concussion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a key one, and how vision training, visual performance skills play a huge role in concussion recovery. And I know even some of the research is getting better and better that's out there. But the reality is, it kind of transitions what we're just talking about. I know because you have some athletes, but you also have cadets that are suffering from post-concussion that come in. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the success. You can talk fail stories too, but some of the stories out of the Human Performance Lab that you've been able to help these concussion patients based off vision training stuff.
Yeah, well, the concussion clinic or our cadet clinic, if they have a cadet that's got a concussion and it's 6 to 7 days post and they just have not seen any improvement, they'll typically send to the vision lab for us to do a protocol for them. And our protocol is very simple. It's Brack string, saccades, near far, and we just do it for a very limited amount of time, 15 seconds, and then slowly bump them up once they start to become more and more symptom free. But we've had a couple cadets where it doesn't work for, right? Because maybe the concussion was more of a vestibular issue, or they had something else that's completely unrelated to vision. And so we have had a few that they came in for a week or two and nothing got better. So they went to try to a different specialist. But we have had several that did get better. Like we had a football player who got a concussion. He was released within a week. He's been doing vision training. He got 2 interceptions the next game. He trained the rest of the year because it not only helped him get past his concussion, but then it helped him become a better football player. And he was training the rest of the year because he saw both benefits. We had a girl, she was just a cadet. She was not an intercollegiate athlete that got in a really bad skiing accident and actually cracked her skull. And she did vision training for 1.5 years and she got completely symptom free. Everything was gone within that 1.5 years, which I don't think was just vision training. I think there was a lot of other things that helped. But I don't think she would have been completely back to normal or whatever normal is without vision training.
Well, that's the thing. Concussions are a lot of things. And if there's, again, one answer, it'd be easy. And it's a combination of, and it's trying to find, those symptoms that are affecting the their, how they feel. And, whether it's balance, whether it's lights, those all have a lot to do with vision. And so if we can calm some of those things from a visual standpoint, you'll see some success. Now, on top of it, University of Cincinnati did a research study on pre-vision training to prevent concussions. And they've had some pretty good results out of that study. And then I think what happened, if I recall in that study, is the new coach stopped doing it, and the concussions went way up after they stopped doing the training on there. So and I'm a big believer in that. Especially when we go back to goalies, I found it with a lot of our catchers that really bought into what we did. And the reason was because they were dealing with small concussion syndrome, or small post-concussion syndrome. Not that they were necessarily knocked out, but they were dealing with some head injuries that were causing visual deficiencies. And that happens a lot. And I can talk about stories, guys that we've been around, but it's usually the forgotten thought of vision. And I've seen some players that have gone through every other therapy, and then the last ditch thing they said is, maybe it's my eyes. And they find, and then they're able to, I'm not going to say cured, but they're relieved of a lot of their symptoms after they get the visual situation under control.
Yeah, there was a couple of research studies that said it could be anywhere from 60 to 75% of the post-concussion symptoms are caused by visual issues that they've technically healed, but their vision system has not been, I guess, recalibrated, for lack of a better word. So they're having issues because things are blurry and it's causing them headaches, or things are moving too fast and it's causing them headaches.
Yeah, I encourage the coaches who are on listening to this. There's no research that I know of, but I know a lot of the pro baseball players that I know, that when they suffer, whether an outfielder, whatever, they struggle coming back for a long time. And they all tell me the ball looks the same speed and it looks white to them. And I had one player this off season who was still had 2015 vision, but his timing and everything was off, and we were able to clean that up. But it's something that I would, sometimes they say, oh, they haven't played for a while, just get them back into it. But a lot of times there are some visual deficiencies that happen from there that can be cleaned up.
Right, that dynamic vision that's more affected than their static.
Yeah. So Dan, I appreciate it. This actually flew by 50 minutes into there. I tell everyone that every time we do this, we should probably be doing 4-hour seminars instead of 1-hour seminars, because we can talk about vision, and it's kind of my passion. Obviously, this is what I've got myself into, and I'm always exploring, trying to figure out the next things that are coming out, and trying to help people understand a little bit more. But is there anything you would like to recommend, leave off, have any suggestions, thoughts, or anything like that for anyone?
I think we talked about most of it, but I think if you can find some simple exercises that you don't have to spend a lot of money on and you can implement quickly within strength conditioning, PT, even skills training, I think those are going to be your bigger bang for your buck, because it's cheap, it's simple, it's something you can implement right away. And if anything, you get the buy-in, and then you can find new ways to add it in. But I think you're right. There's a ton of resources out there. The problem is you got to find them. And you got to utilize them. But thank you so much for having me on. This was great. I always enjoy talking with you and talking about vision in general. So it's awesome. Yeah.
Just to tag on to what you're saying, and we have a new education platform that we're still building and working on stuff called the Academy.ndv Performance. And there are some things for people who want to learn a little bit more on the basic levels. We will be having more of the higher level complex training programs down the road. But right now, for people to get educated on what they're looking for, or how the vision, and then also how to talk about it, and some simple exercises that they can implement with their players on there. So that's something that we have, but we're also working on developing that to be a lot more. So again, Dan, I appreciate your time. That's something we all have a little bit too much of right now. We all complain about never having enough time, and now we have a lot of time. But this is awesome, because this gives us time to be able to talk and discuss some of these great issues of things that people are doing out there. So again, thank you. And if anyone has any questions, reach out to me at Ryan@SlowTheGameDown.com, or you can Diana, if you want to give your email, or you can just go to the U.S. Air Force Academy and look at it, and or ndvperformance.com.
I'll put it in the chat right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Diana. Have a good day, and stay safe. And hopefully we'll get out there. Or if you get out here, we'll see you. We'll see you soon.